Hi, I'm Courtney. Welcome to Something Positive for Positive People, the podcast where I speak with people living with or affected by sexually transmitted infections. Today, I am here with Nikki. Nikki is from St. Louis. She is going to be 38 soon, and she's white. She identifies as straight and marital status
Dating.
dating. All right, and
Ooh, I had to think
I'm
about.
forgetting something. Oh, career field. You can tell me that
Oh
one.
yeah, I'm a project manager, an IT project manager for a healthcare company in St. Louis.
Oh, is that so? How
Mm-hmm.
was that?
I'm good at it because I'm organized and I like schedules and things like that. But it's not. There's nothing like fulfilling about it. I'm
Yeah.
working on that part.
What's the other thing you're doing?
Um, I sing.
Oh,
Yeah.
like how famous are you
Oh,
at
I'm
this
not at
point?
all famous.
That's what you said.
No, I sing with a couple of groups in St. Louis, and I'm one of their like paid singers in all the groups. So I actually get a paycheck for those things.
So you get paid to sing.
I do.
That is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Good for you. I
Thanks.
wish someone would pay me to sing. People pay me not to sing.
I hear that a lot, actually.
Damn, I thought I was coming up with a new joke. All right, and Nikki, what is your condition?
So I have been diagnosed with both HPV and herpes, but I
Mhm.
don't know which version or which.
How long have you been
It's
diagnosed?
for about 10 years when I was
Oh,
in
okay.
college.
All right. You were in college and
Mm-hmm.
you were diagnosed.
Mm-hmm.
So how was that? How'd you find
That was
out?
awful.
Mm-hmm.
So I found out about the HPV first because herpes is not a normal test that they do. So when I went in, they did the typical like pap smear
Mm-hmm.
and found out that I had HPV. And when they called me with the results, I was completely devastated. So to be living with that knowledge and have to be able to disclose that to people, and it's similar to disclosure for herpes. Both are very difficult to do, and if you're upfront and honest with people, then you're going to have to get it out there.
Yeah.
And then about a year into that diagnosis, I still had yet to successfully disclose to anybody, um, which meant that I was high and dry, like no sex life whatsoever for an entire year. And then in college, of
You
all
could just say
places,
you were fasting. I don't know. Like
I mean, if that was a case, that would have been awesome, but that's not truthful.
yeah.
I wanted
Uh-huh.
it, but I just couldn't do it. And
Mm-hmm.
then I ended up, I never got sick. Like there's people get really sick with
Yeah.
their first outbreak. You did, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So people get real sick, I mean, everyone's got different things. I just had blisters that were incredibly painful. And
Yeah.
so I went in for my normal routine pap smear. And when I went in for that, I was like, "There's something else going on. I'm not really sure what it is. I'm taking sulfa drugs and for this other thing, and so that might be what it is. And I think I have a UTI." And she's like, "Okay, well, I'll take a look when I do your pap smear." And I laid down and like the worst position ever. Like for women, is your legs up with, or you're laying on your back with your legs in the air and spread wide eagle for this person. And she had zero bedside manner whatsoever. And she was like, "Oh no, that's herpes."
Oh damn, she just said it like
Yes.
that.
Yeah. And I was in the middle of having a horrible time with dealing with the HPV stuff
And
anyway. And
now we've got
then,
this too.
yep.
Triple or double whammy.
And she was not great about it.
Uh-huh.
It was like ugh, like
Oh,
there was
so
disgust in her
so
voice.
like the stigma
Yep.
essentially was like coming out of her, and she just kind of reassured you that this was such a bad thing
Yeah,
already.
exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
Now, let me go back real quick to the
Mhm.
HPV
Mhm.
diagnosis. So, when you were diagnosed with HPV, you said that that's something that you've always disclosed to people, right?
Mhm.
So, I've heard, I don't want to say I'm hearing, but a lot of people just don't even disclose HPV at
Mhm.
all. And I don't know why I guess there's not as bad of a stigma
Yeah.
behind it, even though there are different types of HPV, and there's the ones that could potentially cause cancer.
Right.
And I've heard even from people who have herpes and HPV that they only disclose the herpes.
Mm.
So what made you feel like you had to disclose the HPV?
Because it was something that I could transfer. I
Mm,
mean, the idea that I got it from somebody who didn't tell me, and my mind may have been changed, especially about whether or not we were going to have unprotected sex. I
Mhm.
don't know that I would have changed my mind about whether or not I was going to sleep with the person, but it would have changed my mind about whether or not it was going to be unprotected. And
Right.
that was the fact that I didn't have that choice made me unwilling to go through with not giving somebody else that choice.
Gotcha. So now back to herpes.
Okay.
You're diagnosed with herpes. Well,
Mhm.
shit, your diagnosis is probably one of the shittiest diagnoses I've ever heard of.
Yep.
For the doctor to just, oh, that's herpes.
She was
And I'm
awful.
sure she probably made the stink face as well.
Yep, she did.
And you're laying there and like,
In
are
all
you
my
in
glory, like
shock?
completely
Or,
vulnerable.
yeah.
Like, what a horrible position to be in.
Uh,
Yeah, and
so
then that's exactly what.
she gets up. I'm like imagining she takes her gloves off and goes, well, sucks for you, honey.
Yeah, pretty
I'm
much.
gonna write you a prescription.
She didn't even say she was going to write me a prescription, actually.
Did she write you one?
No. I've never been on meds.
Oh wow! So you
Yeah.
just well, if you didn't have the flu-like symptoms or anything, you just knew something wasn't right.
Right.
So how did you end up treating it if you haven't been?
I waited for
on-
it to go away.
Oh my! How
Yeah.
long did it last? Do you remember?
It's probably about 2 weeks.
So it took 2 weeks to just go away,
Mm-hmm.
and so I imagine it wasn't too uncomfortable for you.
Oh,
to
no, it was
tolerate.
Awful.
Really?
Yeah,
Why'd
was
you not
horrible.
want to treat it?
Because I didn't know. Nobody gave me any information.
Oh, okay. So at this point in time, you didn't even know there was medication for the pain.
Correct.
She was just like, you got herpes.
Well, and it was just verbally. She said, you've got herpes. She didn't test me for anything. She just said, oh, no, that's herpes.
Did you ever get tested?
I did.
Uh-huh.
It was probably about 5 years later.
Okay, but the test came back positive.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. And since then, you've never taken
Never.
medication.
Mm-mm.
So how do you get outbreaks often?
No, I did. They were more frequent when I first got it. Now it's like once or twice a year at most.
And what triggers your outbreaks?
That's an excellent question. I haven't exactly figured that out yet. I think that probably stress is a big part of it. Also with being female, like I tend to get them like the week before I start my period. If I'm going to get it, that's when I'm going to get it. It's right before. And then it's usually over by the, thank God, because who wants to deal with
You
both
don't want
those
to deal
things?
with both of them. No.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, it just, stress is a big one. I'm sure that like foods I'm eating probably contributes, but I haven't paid close enough attention since they are few and far between to know what is
They
really
say,
causing it.
Arginine rich foods trigger outbreaks, like it fuels the herpes or something like that.
I don't even know what that means.
Exactly. And it's like the more I'm learning, I'm like, well shit, I have a choice. Do I avoid this thing that I didn't even know was a thing? Or do I like deep dive into it, as a treatment or as a trigger for it? So I'm just kind of living the way that I've been living. If someone gives advice about you should add this or you should subtract this, I like to make sure that that's an option for the listeners. But at the same time, like for me, if what's working is working, I'm not gonna change it
Yeah,
up.
exactly.
Yeah, and
because it is so different for every person,
so different, and
which is what makes it very difficult to deal with.
Yeah, and I've talked to everyone that I talk to, like it's so different for everybody. And you would even think that with it being so different, like I kind of understand why, I'm beginning to understand why there's no vaccine or why there's no cure for it. And it's just because you can go on throughout life and not have it at all, or you can go through life and have a permanent outbreak, I guess, like if we're looking at both
God, I didn't know
extremes
that.
of the spectrum. I'm being over exaggerated
Okay, good.
here.
Thank God I don't have that one.
There are people who get frequent outbreaks, and these are like the worst things in the world, and even with treatment, there are things that just don't help certain people. And so for the spectrum to be so broad, and most of our research is going to come from a lot of the people who are dealing with painful outbreaks like me. I've never gone to a clinical trial or any focus groups or anything to talk about my personal experience with herpes, because I think that I have the treatment for it. I have the valcyclovir. If I have an outbreak, bam, take 3 pills over 3 days and it goes away. Or if I feel one coming, I'm like, fuck this, I don't want to risk it. And then I take pills until the tingling goes away.
Right.
And that's my treatment for it. I have no reason to explore anything deeper than that. And it's just to see that there's so many ways that it can come up. Like people are exposed to it. There have been people who have realized or had shown physical symptoms within 24 hours of a
Mm.
one night stand. There are
Holy
people
moly, that's
who
fast.
have gotten it 2 weeks later, and in some people's cases, even months. And like me, I don't know where mine came from,
Yeah, I don't either.
but like it could have just been at any point in time.
Mm-hmm.
And with it being so hard to pinpoint, timeline for, it's just so tricky.
Right.
And the reason that I'm saying all of this is because there's one of the first things that I did was try to find out who it could have
I
come
did
from.
too.
And everybody could have said, no, not me, I don't have it. Everyone could have known that they didn't have it. And it could have just been dormant in my system for, years
Mm-hmm.
because I was working out and I'm not going to say eating, right? But because I was so physically active, it's like, was my immune system just so spiked that when I finally got to a point where I didn't work out as hard, it was like, here I am, and got me. So for everybody listening who was diagnosed and thinks that, you got it from, I mean, if if you got it from one person, you know who you've been sleeping with. If you've been in a marriage for all 10 years and all of a sudden someone cheated, or I don't know. But a lot of us aren't fortunate enough to know where we got it from, and even then it doesn't really change anything because there's so many different ways that you can contract it. There's so many ways that you could have already had it, and it could have just been dormant. You could have just not been shedding. There's too many factors to look at here to go through that shame and believe in the stigma that only a certain type of person has herpes, because that is not the case.
Mm-hmm.
So, sorry.
No, that's exactly right. I think that's part of why people have such a hard time disclosing, even to like close friends and family,
mm-hmm.
because the stigma is so prevalent. Even just in, and now granted, I'm sure that I was being maybe a little bit more sensitive. I mean, the vulnerable position that I was in anyway made it difficult. But when she said, "Oh no, that's herpes," like that was like a shot to the heart,
Like,
and
fuck, I'm not gonna have sex for another year.
well, and I immediately felt like it was a big slap in the face,
Mm-hmm.
like it felt like she was saying, "You are disgusting," and that was the terminology that I used when I was thinking about herpes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I associated with what the doctor was actually telling me.
And this is coming from a medical professional.
Absolutely.
And I think that now that this may even be a reason why herpes is not tested along with the other STDs. It's just because of the trauma that comes with it, like the emotional distress that comes with it. It's like if you don't have any physical symptoms, then okay, it's likely that you don't have it. And I use air quotes when I say that because
Because it's a crock.
yeah, like
It's bullshit.
it's bullshit. So, and I've told a story about a friend of mine who was sexually assaulted, and she had one previous partner, and then pops up HSV1, HSV2, and she wants to know where it came from, so she tells her ex-boyfriend, go get tested. He goes to get tested, and the doctor doesn't test him because he doesn't have any visible symptoms. Not only that, but he tells him, just use a condom, you're fine.
Ugh.
So if he was the person who had it, and his conscience is clear because the medical professional told him all I have to do is use condoms, and I might not even have it. So there's even not even a risk of, or there's no point in him even saying, hey, my ex and telling that whole story.
Right.
And then it on her end, she can't get that closure. So there are lots of people who are just unable to have any type of closure at all. And really what it comes down to at this point is just coming to terms with it yourself and accepting yourself, as this virus is living with me. I'm not living with it. I was just told somebody earlier today, it's like, hey, this is I paid a mortgage here on this body. You
right.
just rent it. You got a room.
Yeah.
Or 2 rooms.
Well, and if you even think about the stigma behind other things that have been in the past that have been like really big embarrassment factors. You remember I remember when I was, I don't know, 15 years ago or whatever, when the little blue pill came out and erectile dysfunction and those types of things were like hot topics that no one wanted to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like if anyone was saying anything about it, it was behind closed doors and with the winky eye and whatever, because they didn't want for anyone to feel bad about it. And now it's everywhere because it got out there and people stopped being ashamed of it and started talking about ways to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, we're still behind closed doors and we're still
Literally, we're in my closet recording this podcast. Oh my God. Open up the closet door so we can break the stigma. Look at us. Bam.
Open
First
the door.
step. Well, you don't have to open it that wide. It's going to get cold in here. All right.
Yeah, so I mean, we're still behind closed doors. We're still having podcasts where we don't want to throw our names in there. We're still, I'm saying that, dear listeners, because I was concerned even as of this morning about whether or not I wanted to give my name at all. Or how much of it I wanted to give or what I wanted to talk about on the podcast, because coming out of the closet per se in so many ways is
you
very
are free to get
scary.
up and walk out of here at any moment you please.
I just mean, like, it's crazy to see how one medical problem that has been fixed via medication and mental health and other types of I don't know, other types of ways to deal with it. Something along those lines has become almost normalized, whereas something, and that only deals with one half of the population and a much smaller percentage of people that are most likely dealing with it. Whereas now we're talking about something that affects both sides of the line. You know, like we've got both women and men who are dealing with this. It is prevalent. I mean, way more prevalent than we will ever know, because there's so many people that either haven't shown signs or have medical professionals telling them not to worry about it. And then, I mean, it's just like, it's crazy to think about how something that could be so small has now been normalized because people refused to stay behind those closed doors. And yet we still haven't quite figured out how to make it out of that without feeling like we're going to be constantly judged.
Yeah. And I think that what's interesting about that is they're all sex related.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that sexual shame,
true.
as, in that miseducation and lack thereof, that's what's really contributing, or that's one factor contributing to the shame behind having an STD, because we're not supposed to talk about sex, let alone the bad sides of sex or the possibilities of contracting an STD or not being able to get it up. Like, these are things that we don't want to talk about, and that's primarily because sex is already under a rug. And now add STDs, erectile dysfunction, you just add more rugs on top of that rug, and then the shit builds up. And when you finally realize it, you're like, oh shit, I have so much work to do. And then you finally get under that rug and you got to sweep it out, and it's just a shit show. So the only thing that we can do is talk about it openly, communicate, and it's not at the point now where we want to spread awareness. We want to inspire action. And by inspiring action, no one needs to go outside and yell, I have herpes. No one needs to do that.
Don't wear the t-shirt, you mean?
Yeah, don't do that either. I mean, unless you want to, if you're that comfortable with yourself. But it's more so about, for me at least, being a point of access to resources for those who are not at that point yet. So for the people who may not know about the secret Facebook groups, for the people who may not know that there is support available, or that there's dating options or local communities of interest groups, that's where I'm at now, as far as pointing this resource or those resources to them through this platform. And so what I would like is for more people to be able to do the same. Even if you're at a party, you hear a herpes joke. Someone's like, oh, don't drink after so-and-so, you'll get herpes, haha. And they're like, fuck you, I don't have herpes. It's like, that's not how you get herpes. Because what holds us back from that is if we say something, we think that we're going to be associated with it, whether we have it or not. And I talked to one of our first guests on here. She shared that, someone made that joke, and she was like, well, actually, that's not how you get herpes. And she was like, die hard investigating herpes before she was diagnosed with herpes. And then when she was diagnosed, she was able to cope with it because she had already known everything that there was about it. So if more of us, and I say this to listeners who have not tested positive for herpes, or any STI for that matter, the level of education is something that needs to be emphasized. The more educated we are, the better actions that we can take when the opportunities present themselves. No one needs to proactively look for someone shaming someone with herpes, or look for people with cold sores who would call them cold sores. Like, it's just more of a be informed so that you can inform when the opportunity presents itself, because it always will present itself. There's never going to be a time where you won't have a chance to just be like, hey, that's not true. And the more, oh, this is so cheesy, the more warriors we have, stigma doesn't stand a chance, dot dot dot, whatever. But what's wrong? Is it doing that hissing thing?
No, I hear somebody out
Oh,
running around the hallway.
they're working on this apartment next to me, so we're gonna hear some random knocks and stuff, thuds. I don't think since it's Sunday, they're not gonna be like drilling and stuff like that.
Good thing.
So yeah, interrupting my nap time. So 10 years positive for HSV. How are you coping with it?
Great. I mean, it does not impact my life, and I can say that now. It doesn't impact my life in that I don't have many physical manifestations of herpes or HPV. So I have 0 HPV outbreaks. I've never had one before. And then as far as herpes is concerned, it's like once or twice a year. So that part does not impact me very much at all. And when I'm not having an outbreak, I really don't think about it. That said, first of all, the person that I'm with right now is also positive. So we are kind of deal with those things together when they happen. But at the same time, we don't have to talk about it because we both know what the other person's dealing with. So it's only if we're concerned about it, or if we're having a tough day or having an outbreak or whatever, then we can have that conversation. But before him, the person that I was with was truly not my match. He was not even close. I mean, I don't say this to sound like a big jerk, but we were not intellectually matched. We were not physically matched. We were not emotionally. I mean, we were like 2 freaking different planets emotionally.
He was just someone that was okay with you having herpes.
He had it too.
Okay.
And he was the first person that I dated after I found out that I had it. And I was convinced at that point in my life that no one else would love me because of this issue. And I stayed with him for 5 years because I was terrified of having to get out there and disclose. I was terrified of not ever finding somebody. I was thinking, I can deal with this shit, even though it sucks, I can deal with it because it means I've got somebody. I've got a partner who knows what I'm going through and blah, 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 which is it could not have been further from the truth. There's such a community out there that understands. There's also a bunch of people that don't have it who are willing to be a part of the community and help and work to understand. So it's not about, like, this is not a death sentence. You're not going to never find somebody that is going to be willing to take on that baggage with you, because it's a hell of a lot less baggage than you actually think that it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So things today are great.
Yeah. Medicine and all the science and stuff. And it's the same thing with HIV even. Like, HIV is so stigmatized, and the reason that you may not hear about it as much is because we hear so much about herpes and how that just hits so close to home to us, and it never really hit home until we were in that position. So anyone who's newly diagnosed, like, now all of a sudden everything that we thought about whatever STD or STI is that we've been contracted with or come into contact with, all of that shit is rushing out, and you have to realize that none of those are your thoughts. None of that is your experience. That's all the shit that you were programmed to think, know, believe. And we have such great medication technology. Like, we are closer to an HIV cure than we ever have been, and it's manageable, it's treatable. There's the PrEP medication, but I mean, I'm not saying, like, I don't want to say this to give anyone peace of mind, like, oh, okay, cool, I can go out here and be reckless and not communicate. I say this because I want people to just understand that newly diagnosed people, okay, when you're diagnosed, it's treatable, it's manageable. And the only obstacle in the way of getting to that point where you have that realization is yourself. The stigma is not it's not yours. Like, that's not who you are.
Yeah. And it's not yours to, I mean, it's yours. You have to deal with it, of course, but it's not yours to own because that's what other people are viewing because of lack of education. It has nothing to do with who you are or how you handle yourself or how you're going to make your way through this world. It has nothing to do with any of that. It's all based on somebody else's random ass opinion that they don't have the facts about it.
Yeah, and a lot of these people who talk about herpes, especially negatively, don't even have it. So what do they
And
know?
have never been in contact with it.
Yeah, or even if they were in contact with it, like maybe they just aren't aware of their condition, or I mean, it's just so common that for people to still think that they're a slut or they're gross, disgusting, and they're whores, whatever those thoughts are, for you to still think that at this point it's honestly a little bit ridiculous. And I say that, you know, I just was fortunate in my diagnosis at that point in time I was in, because I just happened to be in and out of relationships. But then when I got single, it was like, oh shit, now what?
Yep.
So looking back, I was ridiculous. So
So don't be
I want you
Courtney.
to, yeah, don't be me. Do not be me. So take my experience, take the experience of all the guests that are on here, and just get away from that. Like the stigma is outside of you. How you feel and what you believe about yourself, that's yours. Own that. And then when you take ownership of that, you'll be able to own other things in life and go on to do amazing things. That's my inspirational statement of the day. So you say HSV doesn't even affect you. You're dating someone else who has it. Like, you've gone on your drought. You were diagnosed in probably one of the shittiest ways that I've ever heard. What if who? So someone asked me this question, and it's an amazing question.
Okay.
If herpes could talk, what would it say to you?
Ooh. You know what I think of? Okay, so I've never been asked that question before, but the immediate thing that popped into my head, you know the Mucinex commercials with the little snot
the
guy
little
that
snot
walks
bubbles?
around? Yes.
I know exactly what you're talking
So
about.
that's how I view it. It's like that little asshole that follows you around poking you like a little brother, like, I'm not touching you, I'm not
Or like
touching
the
you.
depression commercial where
Yes.
it's what is it? Is it your shadow or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like the Weight Watchers commercial, it's that little orange monster that follows you around. That, I mean, it's like that little nagging voice in the back of your head that just doesn't want to give up. You know, and I don't even know that it's specifically saying anything. It's just that little brother figure that's like poking you and I'm not touching you, you know, like,
Remember me?
yes, exactly. It's trying to be persuasive. It's trying to make you make decisions because of it. But the fact is that you're stronger than that.
Yes.
And so it's just moving through your day the way that you need to move through your day for you to feel good about it. And who gives a shit about that little thing that's poking you? Yeah, it means nothing.
Yeah, that's a great answer and a good comparison, because like,
It's a snot.
like I would say, because I had two answers, and it was what
Okay.
it said to me when I was diagnosed, which was, damn dude, yeah, you're fucked. Like, you're gonna have to disclose, no one's gonna want to do this, like, you're gonna be beating your dick for the rest of your life. Those are the kinds of things that
Thank you for that.
it was said, that it said. And then, like, as I got older and more so, as I had experiences, I don't want to use time as a reference here, but as I got to experience disclosing more, talking to friends about it, which I didn't have to tell my friends, none of them needed to know. It was when I was like in the groups, in the chat rooms and everything, and I was just like a completely different person. And then when I go back to my friends, it was just like, I miss my real friends, you know, the ones
yeah.
who knew I had herpes. And it was just like, well, why don't if I like that person more, why would I continue to separate who these two people are?
Yeah.
So I began to disclose to one friend, disclose to another friend. And it was like, I had one drunk night. It was me and one of my friends. We were out, and she kept asking me, she was like, why do you keep doing this thing? Like, what's wrong with you? Like, all these girls, they're looking at you, and you just fuck it up. I was like, I have herpes. And you can see it on her face at the time. She's like, oh.
Yeah, exactly. Oh,
And
shit.
she's like,
okay.
well, but she snapped back and became a friend.
Yeah.
So it went from shock to, I'm your friend.
Yeah,
It's fine.
it sounds really silly, but it's like telling somebody you have cancer. You know, it's like, I know it's a medical diagnosis.
Kind of different.
Well, I know it's different,
Yeah.
but what I'm saying is the first reaction is going to be shock.
Okay. You're talking about in terms of their reaction.
From their
Gotcha,
reaction.
gotcha.
I'm sorry, yes.
All right.
Yeah, so from their reaction, when you tell somebody you have cancer, or when you have tell somebody you have herpes, or when you tell somebody you have whatever, their initial reaction is going to be shock. And they're not necessarily going to know how to deal with it. Most of the time, it's going to be like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that kind of thing, you know, and a little awkward.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is, they know you. They know who you are. They know what they love about you. And that does not change because of a diagnosis.
Yeah.
So once they get past the initial shock, as long as you're a good friend, they're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
They'll love you regardless, or
Mm-hmm.
because it makes you a stronger person.
Yeah. And that vulnerability creates such strength for
Absolutely.
us. Like, it's easy to be a hard ass on the outside, but it's harder to stop lying to yourself and tell the truth, live your truth, and be who it is that you are, and let other people know who you are. That's difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And the more we do that, the more vulnerable we can be, the more strong we become, really. I mean, that's really all there is to it. So I mean, like, you not saying you have to go and tell friends or people you're not going to be romantically involved with, but it helps to it's more of like an ease. It gives you peace of mind to know that you're surrounded by good people when you can share that information and they just be like, come here, man, give me a hug.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know, all I know is, are these things? Like, what else is there to know? Like, what does this mean? And then at that point, you can let them know, like, oh, this is what it means. My dick doesn't always look like I dipped it in a bowl of acid. It's just every now and then I may have a little bit of discomfort. I may need to avoid certain foods. I need to take better care of myself. And that's the number one thing that herpes has done for me, was get me back on the path to taking care of myself. And that's what could be the case with a lot of people. Like, you begin to just be more aware and mindful of your body.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
So, we're close to being able to wrap it up. I don't know if there was anything else that you wanted to say, or if you had any advice for 27, 26-year-old Nikki that you wanted to share.
Okay, so now that you said 26, 27, I realized it was longer than that. I was probably like 24-ish when I was diagnosed.
Yeah, because when you said
My
you were in
bad.
college, I was like, oh, okay, maybe you went back.
No, I didn't go back. It just took a long time to get out of college. But, you know, I think my advice to 26, 20, 24, 25, 20, whatever the friggin' age was, my advice to that, Nikki, would be let yourself grieve, because it is a diagnosis. Regardless of whether or not it's an easy one, it is a diagnosis. So let yourself grieve. Give yourself a little bit of time to deal with that. Then study your ass off and learn about it, and learn what you can do to help you explain, or really just take control of what it means to have herpes. Because it's not about explaining it to people necessarily, unless you're disclosing, or unless that, like you were talking about earlier, that situation comes up. But it is about being confident enough in who you are, and knowing that your diagnosis does not define you, that will help you walk with your head held high every day. So figure out how to get back to the you before your diagnosis, only with a diagnosis now. You know, like there's no difference. You are the same person. You're not disgusting. You're not any less of an individual. You're walking around with new information. And that's it.
That's a good way of putting it. Now you're walking around with new information. So, Nikki, I thank you for sharing. How do you feel? You said you were so nervous. And we get in here and it's like the nervousness just went away.
Good. I mean, it feels good. It feels good to share it. I'm glad that I got a chance to get it out there.
Awesome. Well, we all appreciate you sharing your story, your personal information with us, and letting people know, like, what someone else out there looks like who has herpes, because you don't look like whatever a person with herpes looks like. And that's such a ridiculous thing for us to think now. And I'm guilty of it. Before I was diagnosed, it was like, oh, this girl I'm about to sleep with doesn't have STDs. And, you know, even then, like, other girls would be like, oh, you slept with so-and-so? She looks like she has STDs. I bet she has STDs. And it's just such a shitty thing for us to continue to fuel with that thought process,
Absolutely.
especially when it doesn't even apply to us. So, thank you again so much for your time. This concludes this episode of Something Positive for Positive People with Nikki. We are hitting the 35-minute mark. Oh, we're doing so good. I can be found at H on my chest on Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr, Reddit, Positive Singles. Damn, I'm on a lot of things. So I got a lot of work to do after we post this episode in terms of blogging. If you or anyone you know is interested in being on the podcast, or you think that maybe someone needs to get something off their chest and wants to just share, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm easy to find. Please continue to leave the reviews and ratings on your podcast player. That is really helping us get this podcast in front of the people who need it the most, the people who are feeling alone or don't have access or any awareness of the resources out there that are available to them. And it's just helping us connect with one another. And it's also helping with destigmatizing the stigma, if that's a thing. So stay tuned till next time. Stay positive. Peace. You can say bye.
Bye.